On a fateful evening, September 14th, 2015, 7 hikers set out to explore Keyhole Canyon in Zion National Park. With spirits high and excitement in the air, the experienced group entered the narrow slot canyons carved by centuries of water and wind. But little did they know, miles away, one of the most devastating storms in Utah's history was quietly gathering strength. From equipment failures to the cruel hand of fate, split-second decisions turned this journey into one of the deadliest flash flood disasters in Utah's history. A tragedy defined by moments where everything went wrong. These are the final moments of the Keyhole Canyon disaster. Keyhole Canyon, tucked just 5 miles off Route 9 on Mount Carmel Highway, is a narrow slot canyon that winds for 1,200 feet. Its challenges include 3 30-foot rappels and icy pools that hikers must swim through, even in the heat of summer. Slot canyons, unlike traditional canyons, are narrow, twisting corridors carved by powerful water flows. These formations are often deeper than they are wide, making them both stunning and treacherous. However, the same water that sculpts their beauty also poses their greatest danger. While it sounds daunting, most adventurers consider it a manageable day trip. In fact, a cheap day permit and a short training session lasting less than 5 hours are often all that's needed for this breathtaking adventure. But despite its relative simplicity, canyoneering isn't without its dangers. Equipment failures and sudden rockfalls can occur. However, there's one threat that looms above all: flash floods. These torrential surges of water are the deadliest hazard in canyon exploration. Once you're inside, escape routes are almost non-existent, and survival depends on luck, timing, and decisions made in split seconds. But for this group of canyoneers on that fateful day, everything that could go wrong did, and with devastating consequences. On the morning of September 14th, 6 members of the Valencia hiking crew attended a Keyhole subway ground course at the Zion Adventure Company. This introductory course prepared them for technical canyoneering. The group of 6 included Gary Falla, a sales rep from Rancho Cucamonga, Muku Reynolds, a special education aide originally from China, Stephen Arthur, a traffic supervisor with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, and his wife Linda Arthur, Brum, a hairstylist from Camarillo, and Mark McKenzie, a system operator from Burbank Water and Power. This group was led by Tyner, a retired businessman and canyoneering enthusiast, making it a total of 7 people. 6 of the hikers belonged to the Valencia hiking crew, an active group known for their global treks to destinations like Machu Picchu and Kilimanjaro. Since taking over the group in 2010, Tyner had expanded its membership from 300 to over 1,000. The only non-VHC member that day was Brum, invited by her friend Linda Arthur. Although all 7 hikers were seasoned in outdoor adventures, technical canyoneering was new to most of them. Only Mark McKenzie had significant experience navigating slot canyons, and while the others participated in the morning training session, Mark secured the group's permit to enter Keyhole later that day. Keyhole Canyon is often considered a safe choice for canyoneering. Its compact size, just a few square miles, allows for quick completion, making it an ideal starting point for beginners. Many adventurers move quickly from basic ground school to exploring the canyon independently, with few reported incidents. From 2004 to 2014, Zion recorded only 2 fatalities relating to canyoneering, one from a fall, the other due to a rappelling mistake. Yet, in some ways, it poses greater risks than rock climbing. Once inside a canyon, retreat is rarely an option. Unlike climbing, where accidents occur while scaling heights, canyoneering demands complex rope skills, icy swims, and navigation through tight spaces with barely a glimpse of the sky. Canyoneers often wear wetsuits, harnesses, and even headlamps as they hike, rappel, and swim through narrow corridors. In some ways, it's more like spelunking than traditional hiking. However, canyoneering is more than an adventure. It's a tribute to preserving pristine landscapes. The philosophy is simple: leave no trace. Whenever possible, ropes and anchors are removed, allowing future explorers to uncover the canyon's secrets for themselves. In fact, many enthusiasts take it a step further, discouraging the sharing of route details online to maintain the mystique and keep each journey an authentic discovery. After finishing their morning rappelling class, the group reconnected with McKenzie, who had their permit ready. Flash flood risks were fresh in their minds, discussed thoroughly during the course. At the campground, group leader Tyner called his wife, sharing how much he'd enjoyed the class and even mentioned his concern about the weather. He added, almost playfully, that he couldn't wait to teach her rappelling someday. She laughed, replying, "As much as I love you, I'm going to take my own class." Fortunately for her, she hadn't joined the group that day due to work. At 11:52 a.m., McKenzie texted his son, "Eating lunch. This is my view. Maybe Keyhole this afternoon." Attached was a scenic photo. Shortly after sending the message, McKenzie opened a guidebook on his phone and checked the weather report. Zion was dry. Things were looking perfect. For the next hour and a half, the group methodically packed their gear, ensuring they had everything needed for the climb. By 1:30 p.m., they loaded their equipment into 2 pickup trucks and began the 9-mile drive to Keyhole's small parking area. As they drove to Keyhole Canyon, the hikers could only see the southern and western skies, their view of the north and east hidden by the towering landscape. The skies they saw appeared calm and clear, lulling them into a false sense of security. What they couldn't see was the massive storm brewing 50 miles to the south, moving ominously toward their position. Another, even larger storm was beginning to form in the southwest, setting the stage for one of the worst disasters in Zion history. They arrived at the parking area around 1:50 p.m. The group grabbed snacks as they unloaded their gear, then walked 5 minutes to the entry point. Unfortunately, during the drive, they had lost cell service, cutting them off from critical weather updates. Had they been delayed by just 90 minutes, they would have avoided the canyon entirely. The National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning for the area at 2:22 p.m., just shortly after their arrival. After finishing their brief meal, the group began their short walk to Keyhole Canyon. They entered the first descent sometime between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m., though the exact time remains uncertain. Before entering, the group paused to take a photo, a snapshot that would later become haunting. In fact, it was the last image of all 7 hikers together outside the canyon. Around 4:15 p.m., 3 other men were also preparing to descend into Keyhole. Among them was Jim Clary, an experienced canyoneering guide, accompanied by his brother Derek and their brother-in-law. Concerned about worsening weather, Jim's group had deliberately chosen Keyhole for its short route, believing they could exit quickly if conditions turned. As Jim's group approached the canyon entrance, they noticed the trucks belonging to Steve Arthur and Don Tyner parked nearby. The 3 men left the lot around 3:50 p.m., following the same path to the canyon. Keyhole's upper section begins with a relatively easy stretch, light scrambling over a few hundred feet of open terrain, but soon the slot canyon narrows sharply. At the first rappel, canyoneers drop into the shadowy depths of the slot. It's the last point of no return. Once the descent begins, turning back is no longer an option. As Jim Clary's group moved deeper into Keyhole Canyon, they came across the Valencia 7. The group was in high spirits, the laughter echoing off the canyon walls. 5 of the 7 had already completed the first rappel, while McKenzie and Falla waited at the top. Jim immediately noticed something peculiar that caught his attention. Mark had his own equipment, a sign of experience, while the others were using rental gear. It was a subtle but telling detail, suggesting they were likely new to the sport and had taken a training course. Jim asked if his group could pass, a standard practice in canyoneering to avoid slowing down either team. As they moved ahead, he observed the Valencia 7 using a rappel technique that stood out, a choice that would ultimately seal their fate. With pleasantries exchanged, Jim's group descended further into the canyon, leaving the others behind. At that moment, the canyon felt serene. The sun cast bright beams through the narrow openings, and the sky above was an unbroken blue. It was the kind of day adventurers dream of, quiet, picturesque, and seemingly safe. Yet, just 15 miles to the south, chaos was unfolding. a small town was under siege by a catastrophic flash flood. In less than 30 minutes, an astonishing 1.5 inches of rain had fallen, transforming dry land into a deadly torrent. The flood's power was staggering. The Virgin River's North Fork, which cuts through Zion's rugged terrain, experienced a surge unlike any other. In just 15 minutes, the river's flow exploded from a mere 55 cubic feet per second to a staggering 2,630 cubic feet per second. To put this into perspective, the force of the water multiplied by nearly 50 times, turning what was once a calm stream into an unstoppable force. For those trapped in slot canyons like Keyhole, there was no escape from the sudden, merciless torrent. And by the time the storm passed, it would cement itself as the deadliest flash flood in Utah's history. Just 20 minutes after Jim's group had passed the Valencia 7, the storm reached Zion National Park. Jim's group was nearing the third rappel when the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A sudden thunderclap boomed through the canyon, reverberating off the narrow walls. Jim's heart sank. Without hesitation, he yelled to his brother-in-law, "Just go." The urgency in his voice cut through the still air as they scrambled to descend. Time was slipping away. Jim knew they had minutes, perhaps only 5, before the storm would trap them. As they reached the bottom of the third rappel, Jim realized he was now alone. His companions had already raced ahead toward the exit. Standing there, he wrestled with the decision. Should he leave his rope for the Valencia 7? It might save them precious seconds, but their differing rappel method could create confusion or delays. The stakes were too high for second guessing. After a tense moment, Jim pulled the rope down and pressed forward. Then the rain came. It wasn't a gentle drizzle. It was as if the sky had suddenly burst open. Torrents of water poured down with the force of a fire hose, and hail battered the canyon floor. One second, it was eerily calm. The next, a deluge transformed the landscape into a raging flood. Jim later described it as the fastest weather shift he'd ever witnessed. By the time his group reached the road, the water was waist-deep, surging with terrifying force. It was 4:45 p.m., and Jim knew in his gut the Valencia 7 was still inside, and there was no chance they could make it out alive. The rain eased shortly after 5 p.m., but the damage had already been done. 3 hours after the Valencia 7 entered the canyon, a park ranger left a note on their trucks, signaling the beginning of a desperate search. The next morning, search efforts intensified, with the park halting permits for all climbers in the area. Still, some groups ventured into the canyons without authorization. Among them was Kyle Anderson, a 25-year-old off-duty canyoneering guide. He and his friends had chosen Keyhole Canyon as their destination. They thought Keyhole's short route would make it safer, despite warnings of bad weather. As they navigated the canyon, something unusual caught Kyle's attention at the third rappel. A rope was still in place. He called out, expecting to hear a response from another group. Nothing but silence. Uneasy, but curious, Kyle waited 10 to 15 minutes before deciding to go down first. However, the sight that greeted him at the bottom froze him in his tracks. Tangled in the rope was a shoe, its laces caught in the strands. Reaching for it, Kyle's stomach dropped as he realized the truth. It wasn't just a shoe, it was a body. Flipping the figure over, he stared into the cold, lifeless face of a middle-aged man. The blood drained from his own face as he shouted up to his friends, his voice trembling with shock. "I found a body," he called. It was one of the Valencia 7. By Thursday evening, all 7 bodies had been recovered. Some were found near Keyhole Canyon, while others were discovered more than a mile downstream. The final victim, Linda Arthur, was located 5 miles from the canyon's entrance. The events of September 14, 2015 remain a haunting chapter in Zion's history. Keyhole Canyon, a beginner-friendly route, became the site of the worst canyoneering tragedy in American history and the deadliest accident in Zion's 97 years as a national park. What makes the loss so heartbreaking is that the Valencia 7 were not reckless adventurers. They were devoted family members and careful, prepared hikers. Cell phone records and reports confirmed they had been checking the weather, but that day, the conditions shifted at an unprecedented speed, giving even seasoned canyoneers little chance to react. Negligence wasn't part of the equation. Steve and Linda Arthur's son, who works with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, expressed the family's disbelief, stating, "My mom was particularly cautious. She would research every damn thing she could think of. That's what shocked us. Like, how the hell did this get past Mom, of all people?" The tragedy sparked debate over Zion's regulations and the absence of professional guides in the park. For many, it was surprising that beginners could navigate slot canyons like Keyhole without supervision. But Zion's approach to canyoneering stems from its historical roots. When the park was established in 1919, guides didn't exist, nor was there a demand for them. By the time Zion updated its wilderness management plan in 2007, guiding permits were still rare. Even as 3.6 million visitors flocked to the park in 2015, 60,000 of whom obtained backcountry permits, the demand for guides far outpaced their availability. Public sentiment hasn't pushed for change. A survey revealed that 82% of respondents opposed commercial guiding. Zion's identity, unlike that of more industrialized parks, revolves around personal responsibility and self-reliance. Here, help isn't always a call away. If you choose to scale sandstone cliffs or descend into narrow canyons, the burden of preparation falls on you. For better or worse, that's the way it's always been.